It's the worst of the CBC for July 7th, 2021, the show where I watch the CBC so you don't have to. All right, it's back, officially back. I'm declaring COVID over. Remember, this show is your medical advice, your legal advice, hula hoop dance advice. Don't go to the dentist, only listen to this show. So I'm declaring COVID over, and I had to stop doing these because every day and every hour during COVID was exactly the same and it was driving me crazy. So for those new here to this segment, what I do is I watch 1 hour of CBC News every day. Then, if I don't lose my sanity, we will do a recap. 3 things. Worst covered story of the day, so whichever they did the worst. Then the biggest omission of the day, what should CBC have covered, but they just chose not to. And then we rate every episode of CBC on the Rosemary Barden scale of bias. The more Rosemary Barden you have, the closer you are to propaganda. The less Rosemary Bardens you have, the closer you are to news. 1 Rosemary Barden is the best you can do. 10 is the worst. Sometimes it goes over 10 because it's the CBC. All right, so to talk about today's episode, let's start with the worst covered story. Now, there was a lot of, it started with, there was just the New Brunswick Theresa Tam, 7 people got their vaccine, and then Shirley got sick, and then it was like, Haitian Prime Minister assassinated, that was real news. So I'm like, oh, they did some real news, okay. And then Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden said, that's bad, okay, great. And Biden just looking so clueless and demented, all right, bad, and then just walked away. Worst covered story is the underhandedness in which they cover Albertan politics. If you live in Alberta, you are not surprised. I am not the first one to tell you that the national news media, or taxpayer-funded propaganda station, actively tries to undermine Alberta and Albertan interests. And they did this today by sort of analyzing, Justin Trudeau being in Alberta, meeting with Kenny, and the person they bring in to explain Albertan politics to the rest of the people is a Nenshi and Rachel Notley strategist. So the NDP, which are not very popular, the Conservative Party is much more popular, but they got an NDP framing of Albertan politics to the rest of the world. And, some stuff he was, right about, standard punditry on, election tactics and whatever. But then other parts you saw, this is how you subtly undermine the Conservative movement in Alberta. You downplay different things. And the thing you're saying, what does Justin Trudeau need to do to, modify the West? And he's saying, well, the big problem here is, Albertans really need to elect a few Liberal MPs, and then so he can put them in cabinet. This is the establishment response. This is what, dumb Toronto socialites who don't want to know too much about politics but want to pretend to know a lot about politics, this is the answer they want. Where it's that's what's wrong. Yes, Albertans are actually mad that they don't have a cabinet minister in Trudeau's government. That's what they're really mad about. They're not mad about the fact that there's an actual assault on Alberta's economy from the federal Liberal government. That's not what it is. Exit. So yeah, what is Jason Kenney? And then saying, Jason Kenney, he's so unpopular, which is true. But they framed his unpopularity as he's alienating the center, he's going too far right. And they also mentioned problems with his base, but they're saying Kenny needs and they were basically saying Kenny needs to go even further left, playing up that he's a right-wing lunatic, when the fact that he's locked down Kenny, he's going to the restaurants, locking people down, him and Doug Ford, just locking everyone down, completely threw conservative principles, all of them out the window years ago, and that's why conservatives are upset, right? So it was just the subtle, continuous erosion and undermining of Albertan politics and interests that I thought was the worst done of the day. If you're going to get one person on to describe to the country how Alberta runs, probably a hardcore NDP leftist activist is not indicative of Alberta, who says that the real problem in Alberta is there's not enough Liberal seats, and the Liberals actually need to be more left-wing to win over parts of Alberta. So, no, that is not true. That is not true. So on the whole, that was more propagandistic. All right. Biggest omission of the day, obviously, the Catholic churches, and all the churches are burning. It's not just Catholic churches. I hate the phrase, the war on X, but I'm not going to slag people for talking about a war on Christianity. I'd say Christianity is currently under assault here in Canada. I think Christianity is under assault in Canada is a true phrase, and I think it actually describes what's going on. And the media doesn't care. Just doesn't want to cover it. And whenever they do cover it, or someone asks a question of Justin Trudeau, Justin Trudeau doesn't bring up the churches burning unless asked about it, and then he says he's bad. But Trudeau will literally say it's bad, but it's justified. And Canada itself, even if you just got here from Nigeria last year, we all have collective blame of the past, which is insane. It's absolutely an insane thing to say, and he just gets a total pass on it. Total pass for saying there's collective guilt that we all have over something. Now, I get it. Residential schools are horrible. Kids taken away from family. Were all of them as super evil as they were portrayed to be? No. Did evil go on there? Yes. Now, is Canada without sin? No. But can we put this in perspective? All of Canada's sins combined from 1867 until right now, all of them combined, are nowhere near as bad as 5 minutes of what the Japanese Imperial Army did at Nanking in the 40s. Not even comparable. 5 minutes of that versus all of Canada's sins. Now, is that to dismiss all the wrongs ever done by Canada? No, not in the slightest. It's simply to say that we need to understand history, put things in perspective, like the way we raise kids, the way your grandparents were raised would all be considered child abuse today. But it was a different world. There wasn't the internet. So lower survival rates. The world was different. There wasn't, a psychiatrist and psychologist at every corner to tell you all your, you get what I'm saying. The fact that no one even knows that dozens and dozens of churches are burning, and it's no longer just Catholic churches, as if that would be acceptable. But I've seen Vietnamese churches. Yes, because the Vietnamese, the people who came here to escape communism in the 60s and 70s, they're really to blame for what happened in the residential schools. I also blame the Vietnamese radical leftists. Right? It's insane, and no one's covering it. And having conversations with family members this weekend, they don't even know. No one knows. If they don't consume alternative media, people don't know that churches are systematically being burned down to the tacit acceptance of the political establishment, and sometimes enthusiastic acceptance. Nikki Ashton was cheering this stuff on. NDP. Just nothing on the churches being burned down. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. We have to stop this. The churches have to stop burning down. For every single reason imaginable. It's a horrible thing to do. It makes Christians feel uncomfortable in this country. Christians have every right to feel less important than other religious groups right now because the government has clearly signaled that they are, and that's shameful. And think of extremism is reciprocal. Radicalism is reciprocal. Reciprocal radicalism is something we all know about, right? In the sense that when there's a bunch of there's a bunch of Islamic terrorists, right? Al-Qaeda blows something up. People get mad and then, react against Muslims, right? Think of this now. Think of all the churches being burned. You're setting the precedent that, okay, someone who's, just really mad getting into the church is burning. What's to stop them from, let's say there's another Islamic terrorist attack in the country saying, you know what, to raise awareness, I'm just going to burn down a mosque, right? Think of how horrible that would be, right? But think of where he'd be coming from there, or she, or they, I'm not going to use, right? But think of where they're coming from there and the justification they're using, which is a bad justification. But their justification would be, this is what an appropriate form, and I'm just going to burn down the mosque to maybe draw attention to the fact that burning down religious centers is bad. And if people criticize my mosque burning down shenanigans, maybe we can stop the church burning down things too. Now, that's a horrible, horrible reason to burn down a mosque. Well, all reasons are horrible, unless it's infected with black mold and then would be killing it. You know what I mean, right? You just don't want to give any sort of justification to any of this. And justifying the churches burning down is just going to justify someone either burning down a Sikh temple, a synagogue, a mosque. You get what I mean. This is the pathway to hell. We have to stop this now. We have to find these people and punish them severely. They are burning down religious institutions. If you don't like Christianity, just pretend a mosque burned down. Pretend these are mosques. And then freak out. Because that's exactly what it is. Okay, so that was CBC. What does it get on the Rosemary Barton scale? It's not a 10. I'd say it was about a 6 today. There was some real news. A lot of it, there was a hurricane weather in the Euro Cup and the Haitian Prime Minister getting assassinated. It is actually real news and they did that. And then blah, 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 COVID and a variant. And he had the parade in New York and it was ridiculous. But on the whole, I'd say this was a not so maddening return to the worst of the CBC. And I will see you tomorrow for the July 8th version of the worst of the CBC. I will watch the CBC, so you don't have to. If you like the show, you can support on PayPal or Patreon below. Thank you so much to everyone who's donated, and have a great day. And it's an even better day, because you don't have to watch the CBC. You just watch this.